2013. Grand Theft Auto 5 was all the rage, Vine has become the new trendy social media app, people going mental over the beat of Harlem Shake, I'm on my last year of middle school getting obsessed over Call of Duty Black Ops 2, and an anime called Attack on Titan starts airing and it's freaking everywhere. You would see that damn
Survey Corps,
Scouting Regiment,
Scouting Legion,
Recon Corps,
whatever.
at every convention you go to, and the world was introduced to one of the most iconic anime openings ever. We had popular shows like Kill la Kill and Log Horizon, but also I was a horny degenerate teenager craving for romance, so my main choices were harem and rom-com anime like Golden Time, Strike the Blood, this one, or whatever this anime is about.
Oh my god!
But there's this 13-episode anime that would be my first introduction into anime romance drama, that I think it was overlooked by other shows of the season, Kitahara Haruki's third and final year of high school, and that I still think about to this day. White Album 2 sets its story during fall of 2007, Kitahara Haruki's third and final year of high school. The Light Music Club, which he's part of, is on the verge of disbanding, which is a big no-no since he wants to graduate and end his high school days with a bang by performing at the upcoming school festival. However, one afternoon while playing the song White Album with his guitar, an angelic voice and a mysterious piano join in with his lonely guitar. This is a moment that would mark the beginning of Haruki's involvement with the two female leads, Setsuna and Kazusa, which right off the bat on the first episode establishes that something will happen to them which will affect and break the trio forever. Based on this little overview of White Album 2, this might look like a textbook drama romance love triangle that it has been done many times before. But what sets White Album 2 apart from the others? What makes its portrayal of romance resonate so deeply? This series is renowned for its complex relationships and emotional depth. It delves into the nature of interpersonal relationships, where it shows the difficulties when the feelings and desires to be with another person conflicts with the interests of protecting those who you care about, in a similar way to this other anime called Oregairu, but in a more serious tone that'll remind you of school days, but also not so extreme where you get stabbed and chopped off by your girlfriend. And to make a good romance story, you need to have well-written and complex characters to begin with. Haruki was the former class representative. He always gets the best grades, he's meddlesome, preachy, always doing things by the book. He's the guy who would remind the teacher about homework. He's the guy who would cry about getting a 3 before a test, but then he gets a 10. He's pretty much the perfect honor student. He's very diligent when it comes to academics and studying, so much that everyone in the school asks him for help, so he comes across as a very reliable individual. Seems both confident and earnest, and he has this pretty boy appearance where I can even say, okay, I can see why a girl might fall in love with him. However, he's very indecisive when it comes to his emotions and romantic relationships, and this is one of the story's main conflicts, which is reflected in his relationship with both Kazusa and Setsuna. And like any anime protagonist, he's totally oblivious to how the girls feel about him. Haruki doesn't think much of himself. His tendency to treat everyone the same is a reflection of his internal weaknesses, a propensity to go with the flow, to just say yes to everyone's actions, to maintain the status quo in opposition to his own desires or to what he believes what's best for others. With Setsuna, she is presented as the most popular girl in school. She's proper, feminine, and rejects every single guy who tried to confess to her. Then it turns out that all of that is just a facade. She's a lonely person who puts a wall between her and everyone around her due to unfortunate events that broke all her relationships with her friends back in her middle school days. And that made her extremely fearful of being left behind by people she deeply cares about. It wasn't until she met Haruki and Kazusa where she found an intimate, genuine friendship and showing her true self, but also she's the most aware of what's really happening behind everything. In other words, she's emotionally intelligent. It's her aggressive pursuing of a friendship with Kazusa and Haruki what draws the three of them together, and her aggressive desire to maintain a bond between the three of them is what acts as a catalyst for the drama of the second half. And lastly, we have Toma Kazusa. She is the total opposites to Setsuna's seemingly outgoing personality. She has a cold and distant personality which has been the result of being left behind by her mother. She is pretty much a lonely person. no friends, disliked by her teachers for being a rebellious delinquent. Her relationship with Haruki goes way back before the events of the series even took place, and they have a somewhat close relationship with each other. And from Kazusa's perspective at the time, Haruki was the only one who paid attention to her and managed to break her apparent stoic and distant behavior and see her caring and sensitive side. The two of them possess a true chemistry, which is understood as constantly bantering every time they talk, and it's clear that they share a mutual respect to the point of infatuation. But like Haruki, she doesn't think highly about herself. She sees herself as someone no one could love, and her constant fear of losing what she has keeps her from disturbing the fragile bond between her, Haruki, and Setsuna for the sake of her romantic feelings. But this is where I'll stop talking about the characters, because to do that, I would have to spoil everything. These three characters become the closest of friends and have the time of their lives, only for everything to fall apart between them as the story comes to an end. And as I said before, the series establishes right at the beginning of the series that the three of them get involved in a love triangle during the second half of the series. The show is very aware that as part of the audience that this will happen. So the main focus of White Album 2 is how the characters and their relations develop to that point of the story. And the three main characters are written in a way that feels realistically human. They are all flawed characters with their own personal struggles and desires. They all have failures and problems that haunt them, and as you go through the episodes, they all come to sincerely connect and care for each other. When the fateful climax of the story comes, where their true romantic feelings are revealed and the fears and traumas of each character collide, a big contradiction is formed. The strong desires to be with one person will cause everyone to get hurt, and this situation happened specifically because they are all so close with one another, and none of the three wants to hurt each other's feelings, but because such situation was inevitable, each of the three desperately struggled to keep their friendship from falling apart, and they suffer because of it. Even when these characters do something wrong, and sweet baby Jesus, they do things very wrong, shortly after that you're given the reason why, allowing you to empathize with their situations and decisions, not necessarily justifying their actions, but it shows you how realistically written these characters are. And for us, as the audience, there are some things Kazusa, Setsuna, and especially Haruki do that seem very obvious what course of action they should do next, but because of them being just 17-year-old high schoolers being exposed for the first time to these situations, they were not able to handle their emotions and do the right thing according to their situation. A situation that came from everyone's insecurities, fears, and selfishness. There has been a lot of debate on who was wrong or who was the victim, which it's easier to rationalize everything if there is someone to point out who is to blame for everything. It feels like sympathizing with one of the characters would mean to antagonize one of the others, which is something that the anime never does. White Album 2 doesn't spoon feed you the answer to that, and as the audience you have to come to your own conclusions. There are no real character arcs, because for that, characters within the story must have a personal growth. But everyone is the same selfish, insecure person they were at the beginning of the story right up until the end. Life sometimes is a series of unfortunate events brought on by our own weaknesses. These characters are put through situations where they are at their weakest state. A fleeting memory where they may have laughed and cried, but in the end, it was simply a series of events that they nostalgically cling to. And none of those things that happened in the anime would have had the impact it has had on me if not for its excellent soundtrack. The music in White Album 2 is so important that it's part of the identity of the anime, and I still listen to it to this day. The soundtrack perfectly reflects the intimate, nostalgic, and melancholic atmosphere of the story, and the insert songs have a big significance not only for the story's narrative, but also for the characters, on which many songs describe the internal emotions of each character. Some of the songs that are diegetic, like White Album, Powder Snow, or Todokanai Koi, have a special meaning for the characters and the position they're in, particularly the latter, which in the story was written by Haruki as a love letter to Kazusa, and having Setsuna sing it, who's very aware of what's going on between them, well, that mustn't have felt good for her. Let's talk about camera shots, because the camera shots also reflect the level of closeness of the characters and emotions, like this one shot from episode 3, where Haruki and Kazusa are bantering, but we see how they gradually move away from Setsuna, like telling us how both Haruki and Kazusa are so close to each other and know each other really well. They're in their own intimate space, while Setsuna is there, isolated, feeling like a third wheel, representing her fear of being left alone. Or these various shots with the three of them together, where Setsuna is always in the middle as someone who's getting in the way of Haruki and Kazusa's mutual love. Although I had a great experience watching White Album 2, there was one thing that didn't sit very well for me. The ending of White Album 2 was not actually the ending. There I was, getting emotionally destroyed watching the finale, the end credits roll, and I was like, that can't be the ending. There has to be more, right? There has to be more! And indeed, that wasn't the ending, because White Album 2 was adapted from a visual novel which is divided into 3 parts, and the anime only adapted the introductory chapter, the very first part of the story, so everything that was shown in the anime was nothing more than a prologue that sets up the main story. So the second part that follows the story that was shown in the anime is called Closing Chapter, and occurs exactly 3 years later during Haruki's and Setsuna's final year of college. And the third and last part is Coda, which I'll skip over it because I don't want to spoil anything. So yeah, there's more material that can be adapted and give it a proper closure, but the anime became another victim of putting out 12-13 episodes for your usual seasonal anime and never coming back. Despite its short runtime of 13 episodes covering only the introductory chapter, it's still a solid story and it still holds up on its own. I still haven't found any other anime that came close to portray interpersonal relationships in a grounded manner like White Album 2. At times, the characters, they come across as insufferable and make stupid decisions, but that's what makes Haruki, Setsuna, and Kazusa believable. It has its flaws and cliches, of course, like the final scene at the airport, and some pacing issues trying to cram hours of visual novel dialogue into 13 anime episodes, but it's not that big of an issue. White Album 2 is an anime that has some of the most complex and interesting characters I've seen in a romance, with some really emotionally impactful moments. Joyful, bittersweet, or painful. So if you like nuanced characters and a good romance story, White Album 2 is the anime for you.